Watch the process and progress in my first 6 months of turning this plot of land into my dream training area for the Pittsburg State University cross-country team. I became a homeowner for the first time on November 24th, 2025. With this came a house built in 1973, but more importantly to me, 15 acres of potential. I named the area Tradition Farm, as tradition is a theme word in our cross-country and track and field program. Before getting to work, getting to know the lay of the land was my first step in the transformation process. This land is mostly flat but slopes down a little from east to west and does include what I would consider some small hills that climb up to the edge of a pond that is also on the land. There aren't too many trees on the land, but most of them are around the pond with some others spread out just enough to make things a little more interesting. Realistically, this was about as close as I could get to the perfect piece of land in this area. 15 acres was enough land to be creative and have several unique running paths, but hopefully not too much land to be too overwhelming for me to maintain. Still not getting around to much physical work yet, I wanted to draft up some ideas for the running path based on my new knowledge of this land. With the plot of land being roughly 300 by 200 meters, it made sense to try to work up a 1K loop and then go from there. The southeast area of the land is very flat and happened to be the perfect area to lay out a 400 meter grass track shaped just like an outdoor track. I started with that and meshed it together with a 1K loop that is roughly around the perimeter of the land that I wanted to use for the trail. I also added paths to create an inner 600 meter loop as well as an inner 800 meter loop. This would allow plenty of variety and flexibility in workouts for the team. Early January, it was finally time to get to work, although I was pretty limited equipment-wise. The west end of the land was filled with downed trees and brush that I wanted to clean up to give me a blank slate to work with when making the running path. I started small with partially sawing up and organizing this cottonwood tree, but there was only so much I could do with this small electric chainsaw. I moved on to messier areas and cleared a lot of brush by hand to get easier access to sawing up more downed trees. It felt like I'd never have it all cleaned up, and I hadn't even started on the biggest brush pile yet. One of the biggest steps to increasing productivity at the farm was purchasing this used Kubota BX2230 tractor. The tractor came with a front loader and a belly mower, so I was able to take a break from the brush pile organization to mow a little bit here and there. My dad let me borrow his old Stihl 025 chainsaw for better sawing, so I was able to clean up my downed trees a little more. I got to see some pretty awesome sunrises and sunsets at the farm through the days of work. A winter storm was rolling in soon, so I wanted to clean up the brush pile as much as I could before that. It was cool seeing the farm covered in snow for the first time. Even though I have the tractor, I felt like I had to pay my dues and shoveled the driveway by hand for the first time, so that was a good workout. After nearly 2 weeks, the snow had finally melted and it was dry enough for me to get back to work. I was on a mission to have the big brush pile sorted within the next week. Any free time I had in daylight was spent dragging logs out into the open with my tractor and clearing brush, essentially turning one big mess into a more widespread but organized mess. I had logs drug out everywhere on the west end of the land. Things would have gone much quicker if I had just burned the whole brush pile, but I wanted to stock up on firewood for the following years because I did not like seeing my gas bill in the winter, even when keeping my house at 60 degrees. Once I had the brush pile sorted, it was time to saw wood, and saw more wood. In the midst of sawing logs, I found a great deal and picked up a 2005 Ford F-250 for my farm truck that I'd use for various tasks, which started simple with hauling some limbs. The very next day after buying the truck, I bought a new Stihl MS-250 chainsaw, so I was able to give my dad's 025 back to him. The new chainsaw substantially increased productivity, but it still took me longer than I thought it would to saw all the logs from the brush pile. I took a short break from sawing to mow down the last of the tall grass, but got right back to sawing when I finished that. Finally done sawing, I borrowed a wood splitter and enlisted help from some of the team to get started on hauling wood up to the house and splitting and stacking it. We made countless trips hauling truckloads of logs up to the RV port, but still couldn't finish hauling all the wood in a day. For a little bit of fun, we tried splitting wood with a 16-pound splitting maul from Coach Mantooth. Let's just say it's not so easy for distance runners to swing a maul that's over 10% of our body weight. Before I finished hauling logs, I caught a good weather day to burn some of my brush, so I pushed some of that together. I underestimated how tough it would be to control my first fire, but successfully managed it in the end and burned a few more piles afterwards. Feeling very motivated to finish hauling wood, I worked early in the morning and late at night to finish up and eventually create this massive pile of wood. Finally done hauling wood in early March, the land was clear enough to start marking where my path was going to be. First, I did some basic math to figure out what the dimensions of my 400-meter grass track would be and how I would actually measure it using a laser that would tell me how far away I was from a target placed somewhere else on the track. I placed wire flags in the ground to mark the inside of the grass track on both curves and both straights. I had to remove a couple sections of fencing where both straights on the track ran through so it would be easier to work on. I decided to mow the grass pretty short and Lincoln came out to check it out. The track was far from great footing, but I decided to do a few 400-meter reps as it was getting dark to give it a few test runs. I had to take a little break from working on Tradition Farm as we traveled out to Virginia Beach for indoor nationals. Both our men's and women's teams won and our distance squads contributed, with the men winning the DMR and the mile and Paige Mullen scoring in both the 5K and 3K. When I returned from Virginia Beach, I immediately got back to work with marking the rest of the paths. I flagged out each of the 1K, 800 meter, and 600 meter loops, measured them with my wheel, and then adjusted some flags on the turns to make them accurate distances. After finishing flagging the inside boundaries of the path, I flagged the outside boundaries and made the path about 12 feet wide all the way around. The next step was to clean up the path and remove any obstructions within the flags, whether it was overhanging branches anywhere or any sticks or logs on the path. Making sure I got my wood splitting quota, I got a new 8-pound splitting maul to keep working on my wood pile little by little. Next up, more fence had to be removed where the 1K loop runs through. Now that everything was clear within the flags, I cleaned it up even more by mowing the path shorter than the rest of my land. There wasn't much I could do on the path for a bit, so I went on a side quest and made some in-ground washer pits in my backyard for a game that could be played when we have team gatherings at the farm. This is something my college coach had at his house, so I took inspiration from him. Since the path was mowed down now, I decided to do a 4-mile run for fun. The footing wasn't great, but I never rolled an ankle, so that was a win for this run. The next big step to progressing was getting everything on the inside of the path sprayed with glyphosate to kill everything. This was going to take a couple of weeks, so I needed to kill some time with some other tasks while waiting for everything to die. I started by removing about 100 more meters of fencing, consolidating a bunch of debris and small dirt piles into one bigger pile, and burning more brush. I bought a string trimmer to clean up different areas, especially around the pond. Somehow, I ended up in the pond looking for a spring that was in the trimmer head, and it wasn't even in the pond. I had to break my chainsaw back out for more cleanup around the pond, as I had to saw up a tree that fell, along with trees that I pulled out of the pond with my tractor that were downed by beavers. Eventually, I had the east side of the pond all cleaned up to fish from different areas, and caught a few fish like this crappie and this monster bass. In late April, everything on the path had died and it was time to get some dirt work done. I received a huge helping hand with the dirt work as someone brought out a bulldozer, a skid steer, and an excavator to make quick work of everything. The excavator ripped out some stumps along the path and did tons of cleanup with dead trees around the pond to make 2 massive brush piles. The bulldozer and skid steer ripped up the ground and leveled everything out to make the footing better, and within only 2 days, I was ready to plant the grass seed. Being in a time crunch with rain on the way overnight, I spread 150 pounds of Bermuda seed over the whole path, in addition to a little over 30 pounds of perennial ryegrass seed in some shady areas and on some slopes. I chose Bermuda because of its ability to self-repair through high traffic, as well as its drought-resistant qualities, as it would be tough to water the path consistently. After spreading over 180 pounds of seed in a couple hours, I rolled over every bit of the path to create better seed-to-soil contact, as well as to flatten out the ground even more, and that took me well past sunset. We got 2/3 of an inch of rain later that night for a good initial soak for the seed. Here's one more shot from above to show how things were looking after the dirt work. For the first week after spreading the grass seed, I relied on Mother Nature pretty heavily to water it, as we were in a really busy part of track season. Conditions weren't ideal, but they weren't terrible either, as we got a few different rains in that week, but I wish we could have gotten more. The rain exposed some areas where water pooled up on the path, so more dirt work was done to touch those areas up, and we also tore up and leveled a pad next to the grass track as a warm-up area. So I spread a contractor's mix of seed over that, rolled over it, and spread hay over it for some moisture retention. It took about 8 days after the initial seeding to see the rye popping up, and about 12 days to see some action with the Bermuda. It wasn't much though, and I was worried that I hadn't done a good enough job with the seed. Since the track season had slowed down quite a bit after hosting conference, I was able to recruit some help with watering the path. I bought a 300-gallon IBC tote to haul in the back of my truck, and a 2-inch semi-trash water pump with hoses to pump water from the pond into the tote and back onto the path. It only takes a little over 4 minutes to fill up the tote from the pond. I thought that having a 100-foot hose would be great for range along the path while being able to keep the truck stationary, but I quickly found out that working with a 100-foot hose was way more of a pain than I thought it would be due to its weight and difficulty loading in and out of the truck. After only 2 trips, we found out the best system was to keep everything in the truck and someone sprays the path from the tailgate while I drive slowly along the path. It was a relatively successful first day of watering the path, until I got the truck very stuck in an extremely weird soft spot. After lots of digging, we got the truck out and I blew off some steam by splitting some wood that night and stacking it the next morning. Rain was frequently in the forecast, but was also frequently missing me, and the ground was drying up fast. Grass was continuing to sprout in other places, but not as quickly as I'd hoped. I caught a good weather day to burn as I needed a very specific wind for one of my big brush piles, and that burn was fortunately very successful. I was able to get in a couple more watering sessions to try to outlast the drought. After having our method down, it took about 7 trips and a little over 2,000 gallons of water to make the top layer of the path moist, but it would all be dry again in no time. With the areas that were touched up on the path a couple weeks prior, I waited to spread more Bermuda seed until we had a suitable rain pattern in the forecast, which happened to come right before we left for Outdoor Nationals. Thus, I spread more grass seed in several places and rolled over it all again before the rain hit. We got 1.25 inches of rain later that night, which was a much needed soak for the soil. We were gone at Nationals for about 4 days and got a little under 1.5 inches of rain during that time. Certain areas of the path were starting to fill in really well, but some areas were also sprouting some weeds, so I wanted to take care of those areas. I bought a Bauer battery-powered 4-gallon backpack sprayer and some 2,4-D, which is a selective weed killer for broadleaf weeds that wouldn't kill the grass. I sprayed about 13 gallons total of mix on any weeds I could find on the path. The 2,4-D made quick work of the weeds, but it also made me pretty sick for a week. After letting the 2,4-D do its job on the weeds for a few days, I mowed the path for the first time ever and it was looking much neater without the weeds. We got a 1/4 inch of rain a couple days later and that was the perfect opportunity to roll the path one more time, which made the footing really solid. Some areas are still struggling to grow some grass, whether it's because I planted the grass seed later or maybe the soil isn't as great, but some areas are filling in extremely well and are looking really nice after another mow. Now the goal is to keep up the frequency of mowing on the path as more grass fills in to promote horizontal spreading. A ton of work has been done to transform this land in a short 6 months, but this is only the beginning of Tradition Farm.